Hey, Mackenzie.
What up, Lemar?
So, for the last month or so, we've been doing a lot of Quentin Tarantino. We've been doing a lot of masculine,
A lot of
testosterone
dude stuff,
filled.
man. Yeah.
Yeah. My thought is now that we're switching gears and we're going to be covering Clueless this week, is this the one time where it's appropriate for me to say, this one's for all the
Nope, nope,
ladies?
nope. I'm going to stop you right there. Hard no. Uh, Alrighty, y'all. Welcome back to We Drink and We Watch Things. I'm Mackenzie.
I'm Lemar.
And we are both sick as fuck.
Yeah, you guys know that we've been experimenting with different episode formats. We've done some with like where we popcorn around different subjects. We've done
Mm-hmm.
others where we work our way through a plot beginning to end. This week, we just both decided to be sick as fuck and sound
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah. So we're going to see how this one comes out. Maybe it'll be like the sexy, raspy sick, you know? I
But
don't know.
also,
That's
we're here, so you're welcome. I mean,
exactly.
are we heroes? Yes. But
Yes,
do we
obviously.
deserve to be praised? Yes. Just
Also,
like start just giving us positive feedback, please.
positive feedback immediately. We are not well enough to take the negative criticism this week. So, all that to say, obviously, we are apart again today, which was not the plan. So, I am sad pants. What this also means is that we coordinated our beverages separate again. And I purposely didn't tell you mine because I have a surprise, but I'm going to start with yours. What are you drinking?
So I decided I really wanted to do some. So I felt like a cosmopolitan or a pink cocktail sounded right.
Hmm.
But now that I have COVID, I've had to shift things, and I decided what I really love how Paul Rudd chugs the orange juice directly from the bottle in the movie. So that is exactly what I'm doing. I have an entire jug of orange juice, and that's what I'm going to be drinking today.
That is the clip for the Instagram, by the way. The just holding up the big old jug of orange juice. I want you guys to see it.
Yeah.
It
There
was
there
great.
might be some vodka in there sooner rather than later. Because if COVID's gonna get me, it's like I'm gonna die doing what I love, drinking and talking about
Yeah,
motion pictures. So
yeah. I mean, it's gonna burn through it all too, right? I mean,
I think
isn't that the whole
what
concept of a hot toddy anyway? Like, let's just burn it out. So I'm into it. All
about you?
right.
What are you
Well,
drinking?
I am drinking out of a red Solo cup because high school
Classy.
parties. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like I just the homage to the high school party mystery cocktail, but I have named mine the toothache. And
Because it's so
not
damn sweet.
because it's so damn sweet. I can't tell you a lot about it because it has a lot of crap in it, but I can tell you that it's pink. And I felt like that was the vibe today. So cheers to that.
Cheers.
Yeah, now you have to go add vodka to yours because I can't be drinking alone. You know what I mean? All right. Well, I think the great thing about this movie is that everyone except my fucking boyfriend has seen this. I'm just kidding. He has now been forced to watch it. But everyone else has seen this movie pretty much. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think it's very hard to spoil this movie. But again, we'll give you the classic spoiler warning in case this is your first time here. Watch it first because we're going to give you all the deets about it. We're going to do a little less of a plot summary this week, I think, right, Lamar? We're just going to chat about it because I think
Yeah,
you all
we
know what
found that when
happens.
we found that when we do plot summaries front to back, we end up recording for about 90 minutes and having to cut that down to 75 to make it a little more palatable for y'all.
Y'all don't
So
know how hard that is.
so we're just gonna focus on like key takeaways today.
Some
Of
key
let's popcorn
takeaways.
around, have some interesting discussions, but
Mm-hmm.
we're not gonna
Mm-hmm.
feel the need to talk about every plot point in detail.
For sure. I did, of course, as is my method, live tweet this back to myself. So I have a few of those gems to share throughout.
Mm-hmm.
I also have some general nerdy gems to share throughout, and I'll kick us off at the top in case you didn't know. This is a classic retelling of Emma by Jane Austen. If you've seen any version of Emma, you'll recognize this plot anyway. So if you've read Emma or seen a version of Emma, same story, just modernized for basically the 90s teenager, man. And it's a classic. I love it. If you haven't watched a version of it, you should. Better yet, because again, I'm a nerd, read the book. Read the book.
Yeah. And I feel like when I was looking for fun facts, that was the first thing that came up on every list of, oh, it's based on this Jane Austen novel. And I remember that Easy A was also based on a young female novel, and there were a couple others. And I've never read it. I didn't read any of those books in high school, so I
Mm.
felt a little bit left out. If they make a young female empowerment film based on the Goosebumps books, I think that would land better with me,
You'd
for
be
the
good to
record.
go. You'd be good to go.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I loved Goosebumps as well. Like, yes, I am a nerd and I read the Emmas of the world, but I also read every motherfucking Goosebumps.
I'm
So,
glad to hear that. I think the thing that's probably most embarrassing is I just admitted I was still reading them in high school. So that might
ooh,
reflect
yeah,
a
that's
little
a good
poorly
point.
on
I was
me, but
definitely in fourth grade.
you love
So,
what you love.
oh, I love it. Yeah. So, we're talking to high schoolers here. So, I mean, it's fine. We can have some high school themes. One of them is, this is a high school Noxzema ad. And she calls it out right at the top, which I think is hilarious because I don't know if you remember. This is like a real nostalgic throwback for me in general for 90s
Hmm.
stuff, I think. I think there's a lot of that throughout. But it definitely looks like a Noxzema commercial. I'm like, it's a very self-aware film. And we should say, directed by Amy Heckerling,
Hmm.
brilliant film, done in 1995. So it's real on brand for when it comes out.
Yeah, she also did Fast Times at Ridgemont High. She didn't do a lot after. I mean, she did a few other films, but for as great as those two are, like knocking those out of the park as far as high school coming of age tales, and from different
Hmm.
perspectives too, it didn't seem like she got a lot other than that. She did direct Look Who's Talking and
Hmm.
Look Who's Talking Too, but she did not do Look Who's Talking Now, the one with the dogs, which personally is my favorite.
Yeah, missed opportunity. I mean, yeah, no, I don't know why she didn't do a lot more. Maybe she felt like, hey, I checked the boxes I wanted to check, so that's good for her, I guess. But she did a great job, like you said. I mean, she covers two very different perspectives there, but she definitely is, telling the story from the female lens, and I think a really cool way throughout. Like you said, we did a lot of testosterone heavy dude stuff. So it was kind of a nice refresher and juxtaposition to
Hmm.
see some like kind of those girly vibes in the film in the best way. I think it's peak 90s, but it's definitely a female lens throughout. And I always wonder from a guy perspective, I know this isn't your first watch. This was Skyler's
No.
first watch. So that was an interesting process. Like, does it feel alienating in any way for you as a dude to try and watch this movie? Or do you
No.
also really enjoy it?
No, I really enjoyed it. And I have to say, I think I saw it maybe once or twice when I was in middle school, maybe high school. And I hadn't seen it in about 20 plus years. Sitting down and
Mm,
rewatching it, I forgot how damn funny the movie is. So I
yeah.
don't think it's alienating at all for a guy to watch this and thoroughly enjoy it. I think there's a lot of humor. And it's interesting. One of the cool things about it is that even though it is so 90s, as you said, in a way it feels timeless because even though there
Hmm.
are the clunky cell phones and the fashion and the music is all 90s, it does feel like a movie you could throw on for a teenage girl nowadays and they would still think it was great.
Oh, for sure. I totally agree. And I think like it's funny how you mentioned the fashion and fashion being relatively cyclical. I think we're seeing right now, at least for me, it feels like a real resurgence of several eras of fashion, but 90s being
Hmm.
one of them. And
Yeah.
so it almost is especially timeless right now, I think, for young women today who are, wearing some of the same kinds of outfits. And I mean, listen, from a costume design perspective, this movie knocks it out of the park. Like just the sheer array of outfits and styles and really like designer stuff, of course, because she's a wealthy girl. We can't get around it. She's got nice shit.
I
It
did
really holds
like
up.
that. I found one little factoid that to me this still seemed excessive, but I thought it was interesting that you would assume that all the clothing worn in the film is sort of very like haughty toddy brand names and like super expensive, but the entire costume budget was something like 200K, which still to me I hear that and I'm like that's ridiculous. But
Yeah.
when you think about the plaid skirts and these different outfits
Mm-hmm.
and the dresses being worn, it's actually because the director wanted them to feel like mall rats, like kids that would go and
Yeah.
spend, which is what they do like two or three times in the film, is go to the mall.
Right.
They're not going to these high end stores to find their
Yeah.
clothing.
Except for Cher, who does go to fucking Rodeo Drive. Let's be honest. Let's not miss that part where she walks home with a Christian Dior outfit without a wallet, by the way. One of my biggest pet peeves in that whole scene is that she can't drive and she's walking around Rodeo Drive and buying stuff with her non-existent wallet, probably because it didn't go with the outfit. Let's be honest.
And you know she doesn't have pockets either.
That's what I'm saying. They didn't give us pockets back then. They were trying to restrict us women and not give us pockets back in the day. But I still want her software. Speaking of the clothes, that is one of the best parts of the intro is the computer, which is also, by the way, a touchscreen. And, you know, she's matching up her outfits. Time. Every girl, and I'm not even like the most girliest girl, especially when I was a young girl. I was very much more a tomboy. Every girl I have ever met wanted that fucking software. Like, just so handy. Who doesn't? I think it's not just a girl thing. Like, who doesn't want something to just match up your outfits at the beginning of the day?
The rewatch last night with Janelle, that was the first thing she said out loud during the movie was, I wanted that so bad.
Janelle gets it, man, as usual, on brand. Yeah, but again, I think it works for everybody. But yeah, there's a lot of that stuff that really stands out as still being really cool, still being really timeless, something you would still want. But to your point, I think it overall really does hold up. There were one or two things throughout that I was like, ooh, this doesn't really hold up as much anymore. There, luckily, I thought weren't as many as we have experienced, I think, lately with a lot of the Tarantino stuff. There weren't as many that stood out to me, but there were definitely a few. And I'm wondering which one stood out to you, because I noticed a couple.
Wrote down a few, and I said, can't make these jokes anymore, with a colon and a couple bullet points underneath. And it was, I think there's a joke at the beginning of a student trying to commit suicide over his grades. You're like, oh, can't really do that anymore. You had a hard R in there.
A hard R. And I was like, ooh, it hurts.
Yeah. You had the line, I don't speak Mexican. And then probably the worst one that I heard was, I thought they declared peace in the Middle East. I mean, that one, hearing that, I tensed up a little bit and was just like, oh no.
You're like, this is not timely. This is not good. Yeah, all of those hurt me. I do think the Mexican one, like, sucks all around for sure. But I also just thought it was in the middle of like all her tantrums and she's like, everything's my fault. And I kind of just harken back to her vocabulary for that one in particular. It really irks me because, you know, she's kind of an airhead, but she's in a good school. She's pretty well educated. It's implied that other than debate, she has a pretty good average, right? Like, she does pretty good grades. So come on, you fucking know it's Spanish. Like, this is not a funny joke. Yeah, I did not like that one. I still don't like that one. Shout out to Lucy for talking shit back. I love it. That's the maid, for those of you who don't remember. We love her. But yeah, the hard R's got to me as well. I did not like those. I also noticed Brittany Murphy. Ooh, R.I.P. R.I.P. Brittany Murphy. I also noticed that she says mentally challenged at one point, which is like marginally better. And I was like, oh, cool. I wonder if she just didn't want to say that and was cognizant of that. But then she says it later. And I was like,
maybe the girls around her, maybe it was bad influence.
I know, maybe that is the progression, you know, because she turns into a little bit of a monster for a hot minute. Doesn't last, but for a hot minute.
Yeah, speaking about that, one thing that I thought was interesting was this almost, I know that Mean Girls wouldn't come out until like 8 or so years, probably more than that after this, but I found it interesting that this is sort of an inverse of that, where Mean Girls is a girl infiltrating the popular kids to try and take them apart. This is the popular kids actually doing a good deed and trying to bring in this outsider that they feel sorry for, and then that ends up sort of turning on them, and she, to your point, sort of becomes one of the bad ones.
Yeah, I think Mean Girls is such a great example of how this can go wrong. You know, it's really, and I think one that people can relate to, like myself included. Not so much in high school. I didn't really have these kinds of relationships in high school. There's like something about middle school girls that is an actual atrocity. They're the worst people in the world, I think. So I more associate that behavior to middle school girls. And I actually learned, fun fact, from a psychologist, that that's a developmental thing, that there's like a reason in their brains why this is happening. Empathy hasn't fully developed yet. All kinds of stuff like that. Yeah. So anyway, there's kind of a reason for it, not to excuse the behavior, of course, but there's a developmental reason. We're not fully developed. We're being assholes. But
we need a bonus episode on that.
I know, we really do.
Sociology, psychology of it.
Of a teenager in general, and like how our brains develop. So again, not to give them an excuse, but it kind of makes sense. for middle school girls to be that way. So I liked that in this
Hmm.
film about how like, in high school they've sort of matured a bit and they're
Yeah.
being more welcoming. And I really thought that was contradictory to a lot of the bullying that seems so prevalent today,
Hmm.
and especially the cyberbullying and all of that. I just thought this is great. This woman, young girl, sorry, sees this other girl who clearly is an outsider, clearly doesn't fit in, or at least in this environment. She fits in somewhere, but she doesn't fit in this environment yet. And they kind of take her under their wing. And I love that because I just think that was always what I really honestly strived to do and still do. I still try to be that way of like find the person who's on the wall and make them feel welcome. And I liked that because it felt so different. So I think that's one of the real endearing qualities about Cher as a character. Like she does generally want to be kind and inclusive overall, I think.
Yeah. Well, between you being anti-bullying and trying to befriend the folks who are on the wall, to your point, and us doing a podcast on a day where we're both very sick, again, we're the real heroes. I think
We're
that
the real
we're
heroes.
learning that today.
I
I
think we
also
deserve
wanted,
medals. We'll make some later, guys, and we'll share them on the instas.
it wouldn't be the first time I've made medals for myself, but so one other thing to sort of spin off of that I really enjoy about this is that I think I forgot so much about it, and I thought going in this time that it was one thing, but it was something totally different. I remembered this being sort of a lifestyles of the rich and famous and thinking, oh, this might not have aged well because it's going to be these rich
Hmm.
characters with problems that no one cares about.
They don't
But
relate to,
they're
yeah.
not like presented as evil rich people. And I think the fact
Except
that we
Amber
get, which I don't get the hate
and
for
Elton,
Amber, honestly.
actually. Those are both slightly evil characters. Yeah, I don't know that I get it other than she's clearly presented as Cher's nemesis ish because they're still
Yeah.
friends. So, anyway.
Yes. So it kind of, I think having the internal monologue of Cher sort of guiding gives us that insight to, oh, this is a good person.
Hmm.
Whereas, if you're looking at it from a Mean Girls lens, you just see Regina George as this terrible. But if you get her, maybe what she's thinking, you might have a little more sympathy for her and empathy. So I thought that was interesting that there's not really, aside from, I would say Elton is a villain. But aside from that,
For
there's not
sure.
really a bad guy in this.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a bad guy so much as there's a selfish or narcissistic kind of person. And
Hmm.
I think obviously Elton is that character, which is a direct homage to the book, by the way. It's Mr. Elton in the book, so pretty
Okay.
close. But yeah, so I think he's just meant to be this just wholly snobbish character. And I love that she says that too. She's like, you're a snob and a half, which is a basic paraphrase of what is said in the book. Again, in
Yeah.
Jane Austen language, snob and a half is a direct translation, in case you
Yeah.
were curious. My English lit
That
degree is here to translate for you.
that line stood out to me too because again, these are all very well-off people. They're all
Yeah.
in the same high school and very rich. Even the burnout characters go to this upscale high school. So the fact that our protagonist would refer to the evil person as like a snob and a half, as opposed to just a regular snob, which who's to
Hmm.
say how many people in this high school are that?
Well, I think what's funny too to me about that is that like we acknowledge that they're all pretty well off. They're all relative to one another in a privileged environment and community. But Josh, who is, I mean, continuing the translation, is Mr. Knightley in the books, is supposed to be kind of her brother type of figure, but he's supposed to be the guy who is elevated above all this, not the same level of privilege, more quote unquote woke as we would call it these days, right? Your first image of him, or not first image, but one of his early images is him in his Ray-Bans and his goatee scruff and reading Nietzsche and doing all the cliche like I'm a freshman in college moves, which she calls out, and I love that for her. But he kind of positions himself as being above it all, right? Like, I'm not into this
Mm-hmm.
high school drama and bullshit, and the shallow nature of your entire life is beneath me, and blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, he is still from this same privileged class. He may not have the same relationships that she has, as far as like Mel's not his real dad. He clearly doesn't have like a full father figure, that kind of thing. But he generally does still come from privilege and benefits from this privilege. And that is very true. I think that's captured so well from the book as well. Like Mr. Knightley is very much that. He is very wealthy, he's very successful, and he just wants to be above it all, but he's really not. He's really in that same community ultimately. And I thought that they did a really good job of translating that to him.
Yeah. I thought the dynamic of Josh and his stepfather was interesting because I thought it was kind of cool that he comes home because this is sort of the best family that he's got. And then he takes such an interest in the legal case that's working. I feel like half the times you see Josh on screen, he's just going through folders and like helping out.
Going through
he does
depots.
say he wants to be a lawyer, so I get that. But
like, why?
Still,
sorry.
Yeah.
Sidebar.
No, it's okay.
I just really have questions about that given his whole personality. But yeah, keep going.
Maybe he thinks that, no, we could talk about that. Maybe he thinks that he's going to do some good in the world. He does seem concerned with world issues and stuff,
Right.
But I mean, litigation lawyers, I guess it sort of depends.
Yeah, I mean, I say this as somebody who donates to a legal law firm called Earth Justice, where they literally pay lawyers to fight legal battles on behalf of the environment, which it sounds like is what Josh wants to do. So
okay, sorry to not. I need to ask. In these cases, is the plaintiff the Earth?
It's the plaintiff, the Earth.
Do they read that out loud in the courtroom? In the case of the Earth versus Mackenzie Wayne, we find.
That is such an excellent question. A lot of times it is an entity they get on board to file a lawsuit, whether it's a community or a park or a whatever, or a municipality against oftentimes the government, actually, many governments, usually the government. They're just fighting the government all the time. And yeah, okay. So now y'all know I'm a tree hugger, moving right along. Sounds like that's what Josh wants to do as well. So I guess it sort of makes sense to me now.
Yeah, I wanted to call out that a lot of people think this is Paul Rudd's first movie. It was the first one that got released. He had actually already filmed Halloween 6, probably what people would say is the best Halloween movie, the 6th one, before this, but it ended up getting released afterwards. So first time we see him on screen.
But I think the main takeaway here is that he looks exactly the fucking same.
It's so weird because I think he's 26-ish in this, and I can see little creases in his forehead. Not like anything crazy, but it's like he has the emotion lines in the forehead going. But it's somehow he's kept them the same. You know, maybe like
he just committed to the
worse.
Lines early on and just kept the same ones. And I think we still all are asking for that skincare routine, Paul. Like, give us a call. Everybody still wants to know what it is.
While we're talking about Paul Rudd, is there anybody else in the cast that you want to call out specifically? I don't think we've mentioned Alicia by name yet, have we?
We have not. Well, I said at the beginning, I think a little bit, but yeah, Alicia Silverstone, this is her most famous role. I think that is obviously not up for debate, but Alicia Silverstone just really embodies this character. She did a throwback to this character a couple years ago, in case you missed it.
Super Bowl commercial. Yeah,
Super Bowl commercial, exactly. And then Stacey Dash, who's kind of the worst in my opinion. She's great in this movie. She's great in this role, but like as a person, Stacey leaves a lot to be desired. Brittany Murphy is, I think, was an incredible actress and woman who, of course, we lost too soon and had a lot of potential and did some really cool stuff in her time. Very sad, but she does a beautiful job here, of course.
Yeah, I like the physical comedy that she commits to in this, of the falling down the stairs and
my God.
I forgot that her character
hurts to watch.
I forgot that her character wasn't just a helpless high schooler with no fashion sense. I forgot that she's just a total burnout. You know, she's asking about drugs the first second she gets befriended, and then she wants to go be friends with the stoners, and they're talking about drugs throughout. So I thought that was kind of funny. I'd forgotten about that.
I think what's fun about her is that, or I shouldn't say her, but like her intro there that you're talking about is the parallel conversations that continue to happen that whole time. Like they are having two conversations at the same time, and it's all the way through. I've never had straight friends before. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay. And they still don't get it. Which I thought A, was funny, but also B, questionable, because I was like, listen, a well-off school like this, these are the kids who have the access to drugs.
Right.
Like,
they can afford any drug they want.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you know what she means. But yeah, it was just, different phrases, I guess, being used at the time. But they were having two different conversations that whole time. And I just thought that was hysterical. But she's
Yeah.
a great character.
Yeah, I wanted to mention really fast that her laugh when they're at the party and Cher says, "Oh, pretend Travis said something really funny to make Elton jealous." She does a laugh that is pulled straight out of A Christmas Story. When Ralphie's younger brother is laughing with the mashed potatoes in his mouth, she's doing this like hilarious sort of
Okay,
like
but you
half
can't bring it
cackle
up and
like
not do it. So now you got to
I
do
don't
it.
know that I would do it justice, especially with being sick like this. But it's like, and it doesn't. She doesn't get the snort, but
She
it's just this like
almost, it's like just
hearty,
shy of the
yeah,
snort,
yes,
which I almost wish she had done the snort. I feel like that would make it even better. Like, if you're trying to be really attractive to someone and then you snort, like, how great would that be? Oh my God. Yeah. I love her little fake laugh. I love that it kind of really follows, that character of just, she's not like low class by any means. Like, again, this is
mm-hmm.
all relative, but she's just relative to them, not as wealthy, doesn't have the same level of access, doesn't run in these circles. And so
Right.
she's just following their lead, including Elton. I'm like, do you even like Elton? Like, let's talk about that for a minute. That is one of the most, obviously, it's a huge part of the story and it's really well done, but it is so high school. So I love that translation from, again, the book to this retelling of this story
Mm-hmm.
in high school, because it is so high school to be like, so and so likes you, and oh, so and so has your picture in his locker, and all that kind of nonsense. But it's so funny to me because she doesn't like him. She likes
No, she likes
Travis,
Travis.
and
Cher
it's,
pushes her right toward Elton.
I know. And it's like, that's the right person for her. And I think that carries over again from like the Austen era type of story of, this
Mm-hmm.
person is inappropriate for you. It
Yeah.
is genuinely, literally beneath you. And then translating that into a wealthy LA, Beverly Hills community and making that make sense in this context really worked. But it was really sad because you're just like, that's not, this guy is so kind to her and is so sweet, and Elton is so
Mm-hmm.
ambivalent. And I think they, just to get filmy for a second, really show that in the party. Because
Mm-hmm.
to your point, that whole scene is her trying to impress him. And one of the moments that they try to impress him is her and Cher and Cher's pulling her away from Travis, but her
Mm-hmm.
and Cher dancing for a minute. And the lens at that moment is on Cher, not on Ty. It
Mm-hmm.
is literally showing, like, she's there literally holding up Ty to spin Ty around, but the lens isn't even looking at Ty.
Like,
It's
this is where
looking at
Elton's
Cher.
eyes are looking
And
at
this
right
is
now.
where Elton's eyes are going. He doesn't even see her. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just so sad. And it's also
Yeah.
like, Cher doesn't get it and Ty doesn't get it. And it's all a misfire. And it's makes for such an interesting story, obviously.
Yeah, I think Jeremy Sisto in this role pretty much, I mean, he nails it. He plays sort of this like apathetic sort of humdrum
Douche
character
canoe.
who's, yeah. I will say that it gave me, again, teacher flashbacks of when the teacher says, "Oh, does anyone else have any thoughts on this?" And Elton raises his hand. Elton says, "My
My
foot
cranberry
hurts.
CD.
My foot hurts. Can I go to the nurse?" That is such, the teacher in me was very irritated with that.
If it makes you feel any better, speaking of love stories, the whole story about the teachers that happens separately, the matchmaking of the teachers. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
matchmaking. That's the point of the story. Emma is a matchmaker, and AKA Cher is a matchmaker, and she puts together Mr. Hall and Miss Geist. And there's that scene where they finally have sort of gotten them together and they're dating.
Mm-hmm.
And they're at the car, Mrs. Geist's car, kissing. And she's like trying to bust into her car. And I literally in my notes have in all caps, teachers are underpaid. Teachers are underpaid.
They can't even get the auto locks.
She can't even get into her fucking car, much less lock or unlock it. I was like, oh, this poor woman. And they make her seem like such a mess, but they're at a bougie fucking school. You know what I mean? They're at a high-end, beautiful school. It's a gorgeous campus, all that. And poor teacher can't get into her car. I was so sad for her. But they're cute. That's like the one genuine connection that ends up happening.
I'm glad that you pointed that out because I couldn't remember. Obviously, the matchmaking that she does with those two teachers is what spurs her to want to do more good deeds, and that's the entire reason they befriend Ty. But I was like, is that where that story ends? Does it come back into play? I couldn't remember on the rewatch. But now that you say in the novel Emma, she is a matchmaker. That's kind of the whole story. That
Yeah.
now I understand that connection.
Well, her whole thing is, again, to the novel, she's very wealthy. She doesn't need to marry if she doesn't want. Her father is also not a big proponent of her marrying. You know, this is
Hmm.
of the era and of the time. Most fathers want their daughters to marry. But because her mother is no longer with us, he doesn't really want her to marry. He wants her to stay with him and take care of him. And he's very wealthy and successful, and he loves their dynamic. And that kind of shows with Cher and Mel as well, right? And so he doesn't really care about her prospects, and by virtue of that, he's turned her into a very independent, I mean, again, dependent on his money, but a relatively independent young woman who doesn't care about that. So where she gets her joy, as a character for much of the novel, is matchmaking other people, because they need it. They need to find a partner, right? Like, that's a big motivating factor of that era, is these people do need to find a partner. And so I do think it's for love for Ty, aka Harriet, that
Hmm.
she's trying to matchmake her with the quote unquote right person. And they
Okay.
really position Elton as that as well. Like, he's the right person, he's the right fit, he's got the right money, he's got the right connections, you know?
Okay, I will say, having not read the book but hearing you say that, I'm glad that they sort of changed the father-daughter dynamic a little bit in this one, because it does feel like he wants her to be happy. He doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
he's obviously very imposing. He does the classic father trope of like, if anything happens to my daughter, I'll kill you, blah blah blah, with every guy that
I
comes
got a
into the house.
45 and a
Yeah.
shovel. Fucking love that line.
But I remember writing down that, God, I one trope that I never get tired of is the father who just always has his daughter's back, and not just in
Mm-hmm.
that case, but helping her out. I like the line of, "Daddy, have you ever found yourself in a case where you couldn't argue your way out of it?" And he says, "What is it? I'll help you. We'll argue our way out of
Well,
it."
he's like, the answer is no, basically. So let's fucking figure it out. And I love that. The almost lawyer in me loves that. I was like, yes, let's do it.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I
I love
liked
that too,
that.
that he
Okay.
just has her back in that. He's like, no, we're going to figure it out.
I thought it was very sweet when she says, "There's a boy that I like, but I'm not the girl he wants to be with." And the father responds with a very sincere, "Well, how can that be?" Like, he just doesn't believe it, because
Yeah.
he's got his daughter's back and he thinks she's the best thing in the world, which is very sweet to see.
And he points out stuff about her too, to her, that I think maybe she doesn't notice as well. Of,
Hmm.
he's like, you take care of the household and you take care of me. And those are some of the things that, unfortunately are kind of quote unquote women's work, and we don't love that about it. But
Hmm.
it does come from a place of genuine care. And I think that's one of the things that, again, makes Cher endearing, that can be overlooked because of her spoiledness, right? Like, she is
Yeah.
spoiled, and she is a little self-involved, and a little bit not educated about her environment and the world in which she lives, because she is so privileged, right? So there's all these things that can be very frustrating about her. But I think when you get down to it, and what he sees as her dad, is that she is a good person, a loving person who cares for him, cares for her immediate family and friends and people for whom she wants to show care and take care of them. And so I think, yeah, that's a really beautiful relationship in that way. And even though he's like this scary daddy, he does that scary dad role, and she's like, "Daddy," but she acts like this baby to him, and she's not scared of him, and like everyone else is. And I just love that dynamic of, she's like, okay, I can play this guy like a fiddle. Like, what are he's not that scary, really.
Yeah, backtracking a little bit, I liked something you said specifically about why we sort of like Cher, and we don't have to get into a big social conversation around privilege and whatnot, but I think the fact again that they have you in the lives of these very well-off characters who are clearly privileged, but she is taking steps to be a better person. And again,
Hmm.
not trying to make a point that rich people are bad. No, not saying that, but I'm saying she is a product of her environment. So the
Don't
fact
lie,
that
you're
she
saying
can,
eat the rich. Okay.
no,
It's
because
on
I'd like to
record.
be one of the rich. That's America's whole game, is like, oh, I could be rich one day, so no taxes for anybody. Okay,
Exactly.
I said we're not going to get into this. Cher, she's trying to improve herself. She's trying to learn and educate. So I think that's kind of a cool thing to see in this, is that, again, that's why I thought it wasn't going to age well, because I thought it was going to be sort of a lifestyles and the rich or the famous. But
Hmm.
it's just to say, you are not bad because you're rich, but you are a product of your environment. You've grown up with this privilege. So if you don't learn to acknowledge that there are problems in the world and ways you can help,
Yeah.
then I think that is where it comes in, where you run the risk of being so selfish and so,
Almost isolated from the real world, I think. Like, you don't pay
yeah.
attention to the real trials and tribulations of others because your immediate environment isn't that difficult in that way,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
again, because to your point, being rich doesn't absolve you of real life, right? People have struggles regardless of their net worth. And I think that's where she starts to learn, like, all her credit cards and her buying of clothes and everything is not going to make her happy. It's not going to make her a
Hmm.
better person. It's not going to help her friends. So what can she do to work on her soul? And she says that, like, now I'm going to make over my soul. And I think that's the biggest moment of growth for her as a character. And it's a
Hmm.
really beautiful one to see, a real maturing of her share the character, but also tapping into who she is again as a person, of who is a pretty good person, but maybe has some stuff to learn, because, like, don't we all? But then she throws herself into it, and it leads to some of the funniest moments in the movie where she's the captain of the Pismo Beach Relief Committee and she's giving them her skis, and Mel's like, do you think they need your skis? And she's like, people lost everything. Don't you think that means athletic equipment too? And I just love her commitment to that, of the first thing that they need is skis and caviar. You know, like, that's what when she's going through her closets and her pantry and her everything, that's what she pulls out. And it's very sweet, but it's also a insight into where she's coming from versus everyone else, for sure.
Yeah, it's at the end of this story, it doesn't have to be that she is a million times smarter or that she's giving away her money or any. It's that she's trying to do better. Not to say that she wasn't already a good person to begin with, but I think
Sure.
everyone should take that lesson from this. Everyone is a product of their environment, of the parents they were born to, and of the neighborhoods they grew up in. All we can do is try to be a little bit better than what we inherited.
100%. And I think she does that throughout. And I think her one moment, I shouldn't say of weakness or selfishness in that way, but just her one moment that she, during that process of trying to self better, where she sort of thinks about herself again, is her attempts at romance, which are hysterical. We have to talk about, obviously, the character of Christian. And, you know, he is, I love, again, to harken back to Mel and his reactions to him. He's like, did you think that the death of Sammy Davis left an opening in the Rat Pack?
I said that to Janelle. I was like, so basically the director said, get me James Dean. And they were like, James Dean is dead, ma'am. And they said, well, get me this other kid that looks kind of like James Dean. Okay.
Exactly. Played by Justin Walker, who does a great job at emulating that trope, that character archetype, rather. He does a really good job, but he stays so cool in front of Mel
Mm-hmm.
and in front of everybody. And I need your take on this, because this was my favorite part. Again, I made Skyler watch this today, and I have seen this a million times, so it feels very obvious to me. But I also feel like there are genuinely obvious clues about Christian's
Yeah.
orientation. When do you feel like it is obvious
I
in
don't
the
know if
movie?
I remember the exact scene, but I think it's hard to. I mean, they definitely hint at it. They show him dancing with other men at the club or the party, whatever that was, the school dance. And I think it became most obvious when she has him over for dinner, wine, movie night. I do like the joke of some like it hot and sporadicus. Thought that was a very fun line.
Sporadicus, which, by the way, for those of you who don't know, is Spartacus.
Yes.
And she's talking about, he references Tony Curtis movies. Wow, big call out. Sporadicus and Some Like It Hot. These are all like tropey gay films. And
Yeah.
the scene that they show is my favorite part. The scene in Spartacus is when
I think
Antonius.
you just like Freudian said semen. I'm gonna have to listen back to the recording, but I'm pretty sure you said the semen.
I mean, maybe I did, because that's definitely the vibe of this scene, which is when Antonius is being selected to be Spartacus's body servant, which is a
Oh,
euphemism for boy toy lover,
huh?
for sure. And that's the scene when they're like playing footsie and he's like shutting her down. That's the scene that
That
they're
I
watching.
think if you want it from a male point of view, when a girl tells you her feet are cold and like wants to warm them on your legs or whatever, if he doesn't bite on that, either he's very
He's not into it for whatever
Yeah.
reason. He's not
Yes.
into it. But
Yeah.
the one that got me, so I go a little bit further back. I think that is very obvious for sure. But the moment for me that I feel like you cannot miss is at the club when they're talking about Amber and Elton dancing, and, you know, Ty's all sad about that or whatever. And he looks at them and he's like, she goes, let's ask a guy. first of all, LOL. And I'm like, yeah, he's a guy, but like he's a gay guy. And he's like, let's ask a guy about Amber. And he goes, Hagsville. Bitch, please. Are you kidding me? He is so gay. And I mean that in the best way. And I love that about that too, is like they realize, of course, and they become really good friends in a different way, which is, I think, of course, how it should be. But
from a purely scientific perspective, I've never heard a straight man call a female a hag. Unless it was like a witch in like the 1700s.
And especially with such flair. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Such flair. The Hagsville of it all. Like you just don't say that as a straight man. I was debating this with Skyler as well. It's like, when is it obvious? And he was like, it wasn't obvious until it's super, super obvious. And I think what's cool is it's still not obvious to her. So that's the whole crux of this. It's still not obvious to Cher. He has left and she's like, I don't get it. And that's really sad, let's be fair. But still, he leaves. She doesn't get it. But then the next day, of course, she's talking to Dion and Murray about it in the car. And he tells her, he tells both of them that he's gay. And he uses all the euphemisms for it and friend of Dorothy and all these like funny lines and whatever. And it sort of starts to click. And that's like when she gets it. And I love that Dion's like, ooh, he does like to shop. And I was like, I don't know a straight guy that likes to shop, to be fair.
So I had a weird experience with that scene because of the things we talked about earlier of some of the stuff that hasn't aged very well. So as soon as Donald Faison's character opened his mouth to let us know that Christian was gay, I tensed up a little bit. I was like, please don't let this. I'm honestly not sure which of the terms that he uses are offensive and which are not. I'm not going to repeat them for fear of it. But friend of Dorothy, I've heard that one before. But the others, I was like, I'm not sure if this is really offensive or not.
None of them jumped out to me as super offensive, but I am, of course, not the subject matter expert here. I mean, I'm an ally, but it doesn't mean I know everything that could possibly be offensive. None of them struck me as super offensive. I always have thought the friend of Dorothy one was fun because I feel like it's relatively innocent. Like, let's all be friends with Dorothy. It's fine. I always like that one, but I don't know if there is one that's offensive. Please let us know. We would like to learn. We are here to learn.
Yes, educate me.
But I do like that whole scene, and I also like that it's like a bonding moment for Murray and Dion because of the whole freeway scene. We can't not acknowledge the freeway scene of every possible freeway horror that could happen happens to them in 12 seconds. 18-wheelers, motorcycles on either side, honking, merging and trying to merge off. It was pretty brutal and apparently a bonding moment for them as a couple. You know, we haven't talked much about like cinematography in this, and I thought that scene was really well shot for 1995. It didn't feel zany or kooky. It felt like, oh, you're in the car with these people and this shit's going down. I can't imagine being 16 and accidentally getting on the highway for the first time. 100%. And the motorcycles, especially, I think of the shooting, like the motorcycles, how those are shot, where it feels very claustrophobic. You feel surrounded. Yeah, I think it's very well shot, that scene. It's very stressful. I mean, and they're all screaming, of course, and, you know, losing their minds. And yeah, I think it's a very well done scene for being a very brief moment in the film, for sure.
Yeah. I thought that there's a few scenes that I wanted to acknowledge where they do sort of a lot of quick shots of like the intro that you talked about with like the Noxzema commercial, where it's just shooting different locations, different people moving around very quick. They do it there. They do it in the photo shoot scene where Cher's taking pictures of everybody. And it's a very 90s, I feel like, staple of doing these things to make a scene more active and engaging, of just lots of random shots strung together.
Yeah, I think so. And I think they don't do that much later in the film, for sure, but she does use a lot of really cool shots. One of the ones that I also really like is the skating scene later, where like she shoots from kind of low and you see the jumps and the effects and all that. And I think it shows some respect for something that's been kind of made fun of throughout the film, right? Like this guy being a nerd or not a nerd, but kind of a loser, a loadie who is into skating. Like it's not a cool thing. And it's like, it takes a lot of work and skill, and it shows it at an angle that kind of, I think, also elevates Travis as a character, right? Where it's like, hey, he is actually important and a good person. And you see that a little bit in the donation scene as well, where he's donating his bongs.
His bong.
Oh my God. But he like is thoughtful, and he's going through a 12-step program, which he couldn't remember the name of, but he knew it was important. But he's a good dude, and I think it like slowly does this rebrand of Travis throughout the movie, which I love because he's a sweetheart in the whole thing. He's a sweetheart.
And tying this to a future movie that would come out, I think it's pretty cool that Murray and Travis, aka Donald Faison and Brecken, would later go on to be in the band Loveburger in Can't Hardly Wait. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was cool that they went from this Beverly Hills situation to then being in a band together. I don't think the band lasted very long, but
I don't think so. I don't think they bonded over that very long. He also plays, and maybe you can refresh my memory because I'm blanking out in this moment. I thought about it earlier. But he also kind of plays, Travis's character plays kind of a douche canoe in a different 90s high school themed film. And he's like kind of a jerk,
it's
actually. And
Breckenmeyer.
Breckenmeyer, yeah. And man, I'm struggling to remember what it is right now. But I remember I watched it and I was like, this is my favorite version of Breckenmeyer. This is the one that I like. He's a nice dude in this one. We want to watch this one. But yeah, he does a really good job at both, ultimately.
Yeah.
And I love that they come together. Like that's the other thing is we have a second match made, but this one is actually not made by Emma. And I think that's one, aka Cher, sorry, that I think teaches her a little bit, right? Of like you can't force people to come
Mm-hmm.
together who are not meant to be together, and you shouldn't fight that natural chemistry and just your heart, your real heart, right? And she ends up obviously struggling with that with Josh. And I would be curious to hear what you think. I think everybody's like, this is a great match. But did the pseudo brother vibe at all creep you out that they eventually realize they like each other?
No, I think it slingshotted an entire category of Pornhub searches. So, uh, for me personally, I thought it was great. I just we had a hard time not doing the like step brother throughout the film. But I think they do a good job of explaining the exact circumstances of they were not raised together. They only lived
Right.
together for like 2 years. I don't even know if it was in this. I assume it was in the same house, but they only lived together for a couple of years. Their
Right.
parents split up, so Josh has this bond with her father, and then later you find out he's also coming back because he feels a connection with her. And
Mm-hmm.
could they have? I don't know. For me, it did feel a little sudden in the last 20 to 30 minutes of the film. I didn't feel like they had hinted at much of that before, aside from them sort of picking on each other in a very sibling-esque way, which doesn't
Mm-hmm.
help the case. But yeah, that's how I took it.
I think there's a notable shift though, where you can
Yeah.
feel like they're both noticing each other more.
Mm-hmm.
His kind of starts back when she's going on the date with the other guy. And I think that's partially because he hasn't been around as much to see her in that light. And so
Mm-hmm.
now someone else is going out with her and it's forcing him to see her as somebody that someone has romantic interest in. And he's like, oh shit, she's beautiful and she's funny and attractive to me personally. And that's weird, right? And you see that shift kind of happening to him a little bit earlier than her. But when it happens for her, it freaks her out because he has been kind of like a brother vibe. But you see some like language even changing that's creating the
Mm-hmm.
distancing where like he refers to the stepdad as Mel openly and is like, your dad, your father says it that way as like, hey, he's your dad. He's not my dad. He's definitely just your dad. I
We
just
do
want to be
not share a
super
father.
yeah, I just want to be super clear. We do not share a father. So yeah, I just thought that was a clear indicator of he's trying to make the shift mentally, maybe for both of them, of
Yeah.
like, this is not that way. Like it's fine.
No, I'm just curious. In the book, is it the same storyline where she eventually falls for, a
Yeah.
step brother? Okay.
Yeah, it is. And it's the same kind of thing where like her father loves him and thinks that he's great and he's on board for it. And it also means in the book especially it means that she doesn't have to leave because because this is again at a time where you need to like take care of your elder family and her mom is no longer with us and all of that. And so she has never wanted to leave their estate in their home and not be able to take care of her father. And the
Mm-hmm.
thing that Josh, aka Mr. Knightley, does is say, well, I'll come here. I'll come to you, which is a big moment especially at that time and in this place of a man who has his own estate, is very wealthy, very successful again, to uproot his life to accommodate his wife's, future wife's, whatever, home with her father, rather than moving the parent, which was more common. And he's on board with that dynamic, and he has this close relationship with her father. So it all is kind of seamless, actually, in the book as well.
I think that we have an opportunity here to really skew a bit younger in our podcast audience, because we can just release this as like a 60-minute Cliff's Notes of the book, Emma. Like, hey, you
Oh
need to
my
read this. Just
God.
listen to Lemar and Mackenzie and they'll explain it all to you.
I love that she has that homage to Cliff's Notes in the movie too,
Yes.
where
Yeah.
she does the quote, she does the Shakespeare quote, and Dion's like, "Wait, sick? Did you write that?" And she's like, "No, it's like a famous quote." So she's like, "Where is that from? Where is that quote from?" And she's like, "Cliff's Notes." And I'm like, "Oh my God." I think my heart broke into a million pieces in that moment. But it's still fun that they're referencing it. Yeah, so we can homage to Clueless and Cliff's Notes. Come here for the assessment of Emma.
One of the things that we haven't really touched on yet, I mean, I did mention the 90s S soundtrack, but can we talk about banger after banger on this film soundtrack?
Bangers. I love them all. Again, I think this movie is so nostalgic in all the ways, but the music is definitely one.
Yeah, you got No Doubt, Salt and Pepper, Radiohead. You've got the Beatles in there. There's a Mighty Mighty Boss Tones live performance. Didn't have that on my bingo card. And it's funny because I knew that song.
Yeah.
I remember I got into that song a decade after seeing this movie, and I forgot where I had initially heard it. And I was like, oh yeah, it was in Clueless.
This is it. Yeah. No, I think it's so well done. And I like even the line about music where Travis earlier is like, the way I feel about the Rolling Stones is the way my parents are going to feel about, or my kids are going to feel like about Nine Inch Nails, right? So I should really lay off my mom. And it's like, yeah, kid. And also, I love both of those bands, but I'm just saying, I thought that was fun.
This movie's full of morality tales. I love it.
This movie is full of great quotes. Like, let's be honest. There are incredible quotes throughout this movie that I think are super underrated. Of course, there's the whole tennis scene, where they're standing along the wall when they first meet Ty. And Amber says the thing about her nose where she's like, my plastic surgeon said I can't play any sport where a ball is flying at my face. And Dion's like, well, there goes your social life. And it is so funny, but two, it's so relatable because I was not allowed in PE for this reason myself because of my facial reconstructive surgery I had to have. And so I was like, okay, too close to home, guys. Like, y'all don't know what it's like for those of us who can't play tennis.
I also wanted to call out the catchphrases in this. And I don't know, it's hard to tell what existed before this movie. What did this movie create? What did it popularize? Because the lines as if, the lines whatever with the big W fingers, that line about a Monet, and I still hear that reference to this day. God. I don't know if they're directly quoting Clue, but that joke still gets made to this day of, oh yeah, from far away she looks great, but up close it's a total mess.
It's a big old mess. Yeah. It's such a gentle insult. It's definitely an insult, but it's it's a subtle way to do it, I think, and it's really funny. And I'm like, I don't know, does that make me a bad person? I think it's really funny for sure. Oh, I liked the Baldwin reference.
Yeah, can't make that joke anymore.
No,
they're all in their, not because of that, because they're all in their 60s and 70s. So if you say someone's a Baldwin, it doesn't really play anymore. It has a different meaning.
It does have a different meaning, but they were hot back then. Yeah, they're like, damn, okay. Unlike Paul Rudd, they're not all immortal vampires who look exactly the same. Yeah, so those are just a couple of them that stand out to me. I think the as if is this, at least as far as being popularized. I think the as if is definitely a Clueless thing. Whatever is a great question mark, though, because I feel like that was very popular throughout the 90s. And when I think of again, this was 95. So when I think about being a kid at this time, I feel like I was saying it pre-95. And it was, pretty common phrase. But yeah, that's a great question. We had the same question with Tarantino of is this a regional or age thing? So I love that about movies as a snapshot in general of trying to place is this the capturing the ethos of the time, or is it creating it? Is it creating something that's going to contribute to the zeitgeist, or is it just representative of it. That's what's already there.
Well, so yeah, so the catchphrase is in this, like, as if, like, whatever, to your point. I think a lot of that also comes from the fact that the director actually spent some time in a Beverly Hills high school, sort of listening in and studying the students at the time. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the one-liners in this, you know, like the Monets and whatnot and the Baldwins came directly from the mouths of babes, if you will.
Like she heard it and the truth came from the mouths of babes. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe she got it all. I didn't realize she did that. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what a authentic way to represent teenage America. I love it.
Yeah, if you're gonna make a movie for 16-year-olds, what better way than to, you know, sit in and hear the way they're talking?
Hang out with some fucking 16-year-olds. But maybe that's why she didn't make a lot more movies. She was like, she's like, I'm all done.
You gotta stop doing this. The older you get, the creepier this gets.
But yeah, I think overall, what I love about this film on the whole is it's a really good homage to the classic, but it is doing it justice while modernizing it a lot. And I think it translates so well and it's so well done. And again, to your point, I think it holds up a lot better than you expect, 30 years down the line. And so I love that about it. With that in mind, I think it's a good idea to go watch the other Emmas, because this movie has been remade in all kinds of ways. There's a bunch of versions of Emma. There's one with Gwyneth Paltrow and then Anya Taylor-Joy. And they're both really well done. The more recent one, it's beautiful. It's like costume design is incredible. Its color palette, very pastel, is incredible. So I think people remake this movie really well, is what I'm saying. They've done a really good job. And I'm really glad we got to talk about a female directed film that is just, I think, universally liked, to be honest. I don't know anybody who doesn't like this movie.
I think so. I've never met somebody who said, I don't like Clueless. And for me, the reason that I had waited 2 decades was just I assumed it would feel like a 90s film, but it didn't when I mean, yes, it's definitely set there, but I was worried that the humor wouldn't still land, and all of it totally did. So a couple of last minute call outs on my end. I liked that. I don't know if you planned this, but we said, we're not going to do all Christmas movies in December, but we do get a Christmas party in Clueless.
Oh my God. You and Skyler are the same person, because he literally turned to me at that moment and goes, does that make this a Christmas movie? Does that mean you did do a Christmas movie? And that debate started. And to which my answer is no. It is not a Christmas movie.
Think so. I think just because there's a party that takes place at Christmas, I don't think it's a Christmas. But I do love the scene of Ty in the car with the lit up plastic snowman driving away.
It's just cuddling it.
Those are the best parties, where everyone gets a souvenir. You could take one thing from the house.
And leave it to a bougie fucking party for it to be a giant ass snowman too. Like, love it. I want that souvenir.
I'm sure you're familiar with the Leonardo DiCaprio meme, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where he's pointing at something happening on the TV.
Yep.
So how many times did they say the word clueless in this film, Mackenzie?
Ooh, great question.
Thank you.
I don't think they say it. I think they say
it 4 times.
4 times. Okay.
I might count it was 4, and I would point at the screen every single time. So,
well, I pics or it didn't happen. Janelle, next time we need pics of this moment every single time.
I also really liked how, I don't even know if this made me laugh. I have no idea if you're going to like this, but I feel like on 2 to 3 of our 7 episodes so far, you have used the word tendrils to describe plot lines, and the fact that they use that in the dialogue of this film and they say tendrils, I'm honestly a little disappointed in you for not using it so far today.
Listen, you didn't let me do it yet. I was going to say all the tendrils of the plot come together at the end. No, I super wasn't, but it is one of my favorite words. So thanks for noticing. Thanks.
For sure. That's all I've got on my end. Anything else you want to touch on as far as the way this wraps up, or anything that we didn't already get through?
Before we go, I have to talk about, why the fuck is this girl in this wedding? Like, you were a teacher. Let's play interview the teacher for a moment. How wildly inappropriate is it? ? Don't know. That a 16-year-old girl is a bridesmaid in a grown-ass woman's wedding. And not only that, like 90% of the guests are from the fucking high school. And it's a very cute ending. Don't get me wrong. The wedding's beautiful and blah, blah, blah. And the bouquet toss is funny and all of that. But you're also like, this feels weird. Like, you should not be in this wedding.
Look, it was a different time in 1995, and clearly Mrs. Geist is a cool teacher. So she invites all her students.
Oh,
She obviously didn't have many friends based on the beginning of the story,
yeah.
so like, yeah, it would make sense she would invite all her students.
So what I'm hearing is that you were the cool teacher. You
Oh
were.
yeah, when I get married, I'm inviting all my old students if they remember me.
Yes. I'm holding you to that. It's now been
Yeah.
recorded, and they're going to ask about it. So, well, with all that in mind, that's Clueless, guys, and we love it.
Woo.
In case that is not clear, but what's our rating? So I'm going to start with you. What would you rate this guy?
Put me on the spot. So I think I need to clarify before we get too deep into our podcast episodes. This is number 8 or so, and for my rating system, I think the best way to judge that I've ever thought is, does the movie do what it set out to do? I think that's my scale, because I could say The Departed is a 10 out of 10 movie for me. That's one of my favorite films. But that's
Mm-hmm.
not to say that a comedy film can't be a 10 out of 10 just because it doesn't have the, that dramatic and like that over the top and the cinematography and all that. I think you can have those across, I think you can have 10 movies across any genre. So let me get that out of the way for anybody that's going to criticize me for putting Inglourious Bastards on the same level as Dumb and Dumber. I don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
for today, for Clueless, I think after just the fact that I had waited 2 decades to see this again, and the enjoyment that I got out of it last night. Sure, there was a couple pieces of humor that didn't land, but it's well put together. It's well scripted. The characters are likable. It's funny, like still laugh out loud funny.
Mm-hmm.
So end of the day, I think I'm gonna go with like 8.5. I think this is a great comedy film. I think it's really, really good.
I love that. I love that that's your rating. I will give an asterisk to my rating as well because we've talked about my ratings relative to other things, like being one, Russian judge, I'm the asshole here. Got it. Fine. But two, that it felt a little inconsistent previously. And I think that's because my ratings are very gut checky, to be honest. It's like, what do I think about it in that moment? How did it make me feel? I don't know that I'm always thinking about it relative to other films that I love, because I think that films that I would rewatch over and over that I really love might rank lower than some others that I think are amazing and I would never watch again. So I think you could get into the weeds with like a watchability rating and quality rating and all those kinds of things. But my gut check on Clueless is like a 9. Yeah, it's like an 8.5 or a
Nice.
9 as well. I love this movie. I think it holds up. And again, as a little bit of a nerd, I love how well it's adapted, and I think it holds up throughout. So good job, Amy. I love that we had an incredible female directed film to cancel out some balance out. Sorry,
Hey, yeah,
balance
not
out,
cancel. Come
not
on.
cancel. We love Tarantino. Sorry, but balance out some of the Tarantino of it all. So thanks for joining us for that bit. We are gonna do some more because again, there's still some balance to be had. So next week we're gonna talk Marie Antoinette. And before we go, have you seen it yet?
No, I'm so bad at history that I don't even know who Marie Antoinette is off the top of my head. I
Wait, but is
assume
that for real?
that's not a joke. History is like one of my least favorite subjects. I don't know. It's Marie Antoinette. I assume she's a pop star, but
Wow. You're gonna get roasted so hard. Remember how you were getting hate mail in the early episodes?
I
It's good.
still am.
I think it's gonna happen again. Marie Antoinette is the last queen of France before the French Revolution. So go do your homework before you come back next week. But by the way, you're not alone. I had the same conversation with Skyler, who was like, "Who's Marie Antoinette?" And I almost cried.
Well,
But
the French Revolution, that's news to me too. So congratulations, friends. Good for you.
okay, well, I'm the nerd in the room, is what we have established. But the point is, the film is super interesting and directed by another woman, Sofia Coppola. So we'll be talking about that next week and having a
And
great
also,
conversation.
And also, we just spent the last hour talking about dumb, likable characters. So I think I am very on brand for today's episode.
You are fitting right in 100%. So for now, go do your research, first of all, so that you are prepared for this next one. But also, go have a drink and watch a thing. Cheers.
Cheers and feel better.
Indeed. Feel better.